Every single pull quote I have seen about Pixar in the last 2 weeks has increased my risk for an aneurysm, but nothing raised my blood pressure quite as high as Pixar is developing its first musical ever, and the hot garbage take about the motivation behind why that followed from Pixar's senior vice president of development. Why am I so pissed off as a professional musical theater performer and songwriter? Do I think this project is doomed to fail? What else was in that article that you definitely didn't read? This is Calxiyn, just barely here. I think they are trying to kill me. To answer all of those questions, discuss/rant about the Wall Street Journal article, Disney needs its next hit franchise, can Pixar's reluctant leader deliver? And to, of course, make you care. I do feel the need to give some context first, though. A lot of my opinions here were formed directly by the extensive research about Disney/Pixar that I did for these video essays. I just can't condense these 2 hours of heartbreak, rage, and disappointment and the over 30 interviews, books, and documentaries into what will hopefully be a 15-minute news video, but I will flash the corresponding thumbnail on screen so you know where you can hear more about a certain topic and take a look at the sources for yourself. A few months ago, I got to whip out my professional communications/marketing background, and Hunter and I presented our argument for everyone is wrong about the core of Pixar's issues, Pixar themselves has no idea what the problem is, and here it is, our presentation in video form. And Pete Docter is not reassuring me that this has changed, which is very concerning considering that he is Chief Creative Officer. All of this is missing the forest for the trees. This being, he said he probably over-indexed on do whatever you want, and from the article, as to the reason why they haven't had an original success since Coco, current and former employees say that one of the biggest reasons is that the conflict-averse Doctor encouraged new directors to make autobiographical movies that too many audience members struggled to connect with. Docter is pushing Pixar to re-embrace the universally relatable concepts like talking toys and monsters in the closet that once made it a juggernaut, and he says, as time's gone on, I realize my job is to make sure the films appeal to everyone. They also mention that part of the process now for approval is gauging sequel potential, and they really scrutinize Pete Docter here compared to John Lasseter and make him out to be timid, that he never wants to be the bad guy, and that he gives less direct feedback. But this is the key to our discussion for this section. Until 2018, Pixar's movies were all filtered through the taste of one man, John Lasseter. If you have seen my videos before, you will know that I despise John Lasseter. I have no love in my heart for Pixar at all, actually. But the reason why I don't like their films in the very first place is also the reason why Pixar was so successful. Let me explain. When Pixar was conceived, there was a very clear agenda, or brand thesis if you want to call it that. No musicals, no sappy love story, no happy little village, no fairy tales, no princesses. And this mentality trickled down from the top. When Brave was pitched, for example, production designer Steve Pitcher said, apparently without any shame, that his eyes glazed over. Princess, king, mother, daughter, all words I didn't like to think about. And a quote from this journal that we have referenced before really gets to the heart of the matter. It is not just princesses that make the boys at Pixar cringe. Some commentators have argued that Pixar has an aversion to girls in general, and they do, off and on screen. Something, not all Pixar men, allegedly, in my opinion, reading their own words with a working brain, don't sue me, whatever. But in these videos, I explain more about the toxic boys club environment at the studio and give more examples of bizarre quotes from Pixar creatives about their movies, where the underlying sentiment is just so clearly, we don't want that frou-frou girly shit, these movies are for the boys. And sometimes it wasn't so subtextual at all. They just said the quiet part out loud. Back in this video with Hunter, we also talked about how Pixar has historically used said toys and monsters in the closet to tell autobiographical stories about boys and the midlife crises of middle-aged men. Which is all well and good for someone who is not me, I guess, until the people at Pixar start pretending that those stories were never autobiographical in the first place, which we'll see later. But this is very important. Pixar felt like they were rebelling specifically against Disney, that they were the underdogs in pioneering a change in the animation industry. And even later on, you could say that Pixar was rebelling against other status quos, like say the average superhero movie. But what they don't seem to understand is in that brand identity is a promise to the audience. This promise of, yes, other companies have made movies about inanimate objects or cars or superheroes, but we're different. There's something special here, rebellious, something you didn't even know that you want and you won't be complete until you get it. And because of that, there is this other layer. Parents, this isn't mind-numbing slop that you have to hide from your kids so they don't ask you to go see it. You'll be able to bond over this, and both of you will have a good time. I suppose you could say that on the surface, you win over the boys with the monsters, but then the middle-aged men with the midlife crises, as we already talked about. But what happens to your brand identity when the entire foundation for it, for your creative philosophies, for your storytelling sensibilities, was built in opposition to, or in rebellion of, another company's brand identity? And said company is also having an identity crisis at the moment. To the point where Disney movies feel like Pixar, and Pixar movies feel like Disney, which causes audience confusion. What happens when it's not just that you have nothing to rebel against anymore because you are no longer the underdog, but also that you are too chicken shit to do so anyway? As we talked about all those months ago, the studio that built their reputation on rebellion is too cowardly to rebel or stand for anything anymore. And this article gave us a brand new batshit quote about Elio, Doctor stating in a surprisingly not very PR-trained way, like I don't know who let him say this. Doctor said Pixar found some parents didn't want entertainment to force them to have a conversation they weren't ready for their children. We're making a movie, not hundreds of millions of dollars of therapy. Brought to you by the man that started a movie with a miscarriage. I'd love to know what he meant by this, because there's therapy because somehow gay people existing is going to mentally scar a child forever, or family therapy because children are going to get into conflict with their bigoted parents when the movie imparts a basic kindergarten lesson about, like, acceptance and friendship and whatever, and I don't know which one would be worse, so I guess choose your choice, you know? Oh yeah, speaking of Up, by the way, while researching for this script, I found he based the protagonist of Up partially on himself, based on his frequent feelings of social awkwardness and his desire to get away from crowds to contemplate. Very rules for thee and not for me of you, but we know why the double standard is here, right? The other directors are getting the finger wag because they aren't white old men. But that's just it, isn't it? Even though COVID gave them this massive debuff and shoving the movies onto streaming certainly didn't help, Pixar put all their eggs into the boys and middle-aged men basket in the very first place. A demographic that is getting radicalized by right-wing internet grifters at this alarming rate. And so even if movies like Turning Red have that same Pixar rebellion / emotional core or what have you, that audience didn't want it. I feel like it's obvious that after John Lasseter, people at Pixar clearly wanted to evolve the brand identity, hence Luca and Turning Red and Soul, but Pete Docter is unwilling to commit to it, to create a strong new filter and redefine that Pixar brand thesis. So they decided to return to those universal concepts, code for what appeals to boys and middle-aged men. But this time, they're gonna do it without the rebellion part. They are scared of their own audience crying woke at Hoppers, despite that same audience growing up with WALL-E. An audience who is too dumb to realize that what they liked about Pixar's movies were the strong messages. It is literally just everyone is 12 now in play. These people hate vegetables. They want to go back to the good old days where they got to eat brownies all the time. But they didn't notice that WALL-E or The Incredibles was actually doing the movie equivalent of hiding the vegetables in the brownies. There were always vegetables. And as a child, you never hated the vegetables. You only hate the vegetables now because a YouTuber told you to. Because you are 12. Anyway, without the rebellion, it's not a Pixar movie anymore. It's a generic kids movie. And we have to remember that the real business for Disney/Pixar is manufacturing Disney/Pixar adults. And so if they go down this road of middling, shallow, generic slop where there is no reason to go back to these movies as adults, they will be making movies that children grow out of, not grow up with. And they will fail to convert those children into lifelong Disney adults who go to the parks or on a cruise or buy an $800 Disney Castle Lego set. And then those adults will not start converting their children and the children of those children. And this is already happening. Audiences have no idea what they're going to get when they sit down for a Pixar movie anymore. Is it gonna be a Pixar movie that really feels like it should be Disney? A Pixar movie that really feels like DreamWorks, or a movie that feels indistinguishable from like the studio that makes the Minion stuff. That's why people aren't showing up anymore, because the strong promises have been replaced with safe and inoffensive, and ripping out the emotional cores of the movies to do that. Pixar will broadcast to the world, "Don't worry, we have nothing to say," and they get surprised when we believe them. And the other hill that I will die on, and maybe another reason why I have always rolled my eyes at Pixar, to truly rebel, I don't think you can just proclaim to the masses that you're rebelling. That is something that the audience bestows on you. When the story is genuinely different to them and resonates with them in a way that other movies that are part of the status quo have not. Put a pin in this for later. Before we move on, there is something else in here that I just can't let go. The article says, much of Inside Out 2 was made in a frantic all-hands crunch because the filmmakers didn't finalize their story until the fall before its June 2024 release. We know that Disney inherited some batshit production pipeline issues when John Lasseter came in to Pixarify them for Tangled, which are uniquely detrimental when it comes to creating an animated musical. But has no one realized that this might be a problem for the non-movie musicals as well? I just have to laugh when they go, "Well, if you want originals, you need to support them because these movies cost so much money to make. Think of the poor little billion-dollar company just trying their best." But have they considered that if they, I don't know, finalize the story, they wouldn't be burning out talent and burning through money from everyone having to, as we know with Frozen and also Frozen 2, start their shit over as the script changes on a weekly basis? Having all of these different departments already working when the director and the screenwriters are floundering is just the blind leading the blind. Here's how things went, starting with movies like The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast. There was a draft of the script. All key parties sat down together and the draft was retooled into a musical. And then everybody else knew what the vision they were working towards was. You could say that 2D animation demanded that those parties have their story shit together, because changes on the level of those Pixar movies or Frozen 2s mere months before release would have been catastrophic, even impossible in 2D. That doesn't mean that nothing got deleted during the Disney Renaissance, but it was not anything close to the shit show that the Lopez's experienced on Frozen, where they wrote and rewrote over 27 songs because the script kept changing week to week, or Julia Michaels getting cryptic pieces of things, not getting to see the script at all, and being expected to write a compelling musical somehow for Wish. And there it is, the thing that the video is actually about: musicals. You'll see why I thought that all that context was necessary before we talk about the horrifying part of this article. Pixar is also developing its first ever musical. I guess Coco doesn't count, and they're using the definition of a musical that I actually said quite recently was bullshit. Now let's make something crystal fucking clear, okay? I have no opinion on or impression of Turning Red's director. It was the senior vice president of development that put fear into my heart, saying, one of the things that brought the initial group together here was a desire to rebel against the traditional Disney musical. This next generation grew up on Pixar, and they're figuring out their version of rebellion. Oh my fucking god. I am not saying that this is guaranteed to be hot garbage. That wouldn't be very fair of me. We know nothing about it yet. What I am saying is that if Pixar went, we're making a musical about cannibals, such a thing would disturb me significantly less than to rebel against the traditional Disney musical. We're so daring today, aren't we? Why would I find this concerning? Pixar has no idea how to make a musical. They are, in fact, responsible for the downfall of the Disney movie musical, starting with Tangled, because of story sensibilities and creative philosophies brought in by John Lasseter and the new Pixar crew. Please go watch the 50-minute video where I explain this thoroughly and where I was not sick, and another 40-minute video with even more interviews and showcasing how K-pop Demon Hunters' creative philosophies are completely different. And as if my confidence in them was not already low enough, let's talk about the rebellion part. What in the world are you possibly rebelling against? This is the safest thing you could possibly do! They are trying to reheat John Lasseter's anti-musical nachos, but we don't live in a world where traditional musicals are dominating anymore! Even for contemporary musicals, the film industry has to trick the audience into going to see them. After cutting every flashback to a previous video from my script, Hunter added, "It reminds me how comedians talk about how their comedy is edgy and pushes boundaries and people can't handle it, as if their brand of low-hanging fruit edginess isn't very prominent and popular and marketable. You aren't rebelling against shit." Pixar already took the traditional Disney movie musical out back and shot it! There is nothing left for you to ruin! Alan Menken, Glenn Slater, and others who worked on Tangled say that because of Pixar's storytelling sensibilities and creative philosophies, that Tangled was a hybrid. This is also why Alan Menken had to go into a more pop music style direction, despite Glenn Keane's original vision being a darker, traditional Disney musical. Pixar is like, okay, you can have songs, but not like the stupid frou-frou Broadway ones, though. And then also, this is about us and those lanterns, not Alan's big ballad, even though this is a musical. We need to prove we do 3D better than DreamWorks in our race to the bottom for the best realistic visuals. Go make one of the most important songs in the movie worse so our technology shines brighter. You know, I wonder why Alan Menken and Glenn Slater didn't show up in the Tangled production documentary, even though every previous Disney documentary has had a music section, and have multiple interviews where they talk about being frustrated. I wonder why Steven Schwartz left as lyricist in the very first place because of creative differences. It truly is a mystery. If only there were videos on the internet that solved it. I bring this up because every film since Tangled has already been a hybrid. Pixar, you already won! There is nothing left to rebel against! We have gotten so many stories making fun of fairy tales or musicals in literally every medium. Stage, animation, live action, late night comedy skit shit, or YouTube parody stuff. Even Disney has to be meta all the time and is too afraid of being sincere, always writing from a defensive position of, no, wait, please, don't think we're being vulnerable and cringe. We'll have Maui say that if Moana starts singing, he's gonna throw up. Please come back. Not that I want Pixar to, they should stay in their own fucking lane, but it would genuinely be more rebellious at this point to make a sincere, fully traditional Renaissance-style musical. But now I'm gonna tell you why I really wanted to make this video and what I think is going unsaid. The thing that no one is talking about. The first thing we heard about this project is not why it should exist based on its own merit, but how it exists in opposition to a non-existent status quo. It's not about what makes it special or what it's going to be. Its only current selling point is what it's not going to be. It's not even that rebellion is necessarily a bad thing. It is impossible for our creative ideas to exist in a vacuum. But I think this mindset can be a poison. Just like I want my thing to be the next blank can. I made this channel because I wasn't finding the content that I wanted to watch. But I don't go into every video thinking everyone else is dog shit or gone, and I'm the last bastion of good Disney videos. We need to rebel against the YouTube slop status quo. I think that is a very arrogant and toxic mindset. And being so focused on what you're not means that you're not prioritizing what you are. I wouldn't be prioritizing my creative philosophy, my desires, or my objectives with this channel. And I'd be in big trouble if the only thing going for me was, I'm not like those other channels, no one does what I do. And then suddenly people who, say, make hour-long videos about Barbie movies did appear. Or Sideways returns from the dead on a random Tuesday. When it comes to my VTuber musical project, though I have mentioned how I'm disappointed Disney hasn't given us a princess who can fight the monsters like Hercules, but also sings like Aurora, that wasn't the origin point or my inspiration, and that is not the thesis or the guiding star of this project. Nor is Wish sucked and I can do so much better, I'll show them, or to rebel against this new pop-driven status quo. Because Wish didn't even exist when Soliana and Udine started gnawing on my brain like the Baldur's Gate tadpoles. If the Pixar team behind this musical somehow feels like traditional musicals need to be rebelled against, despite the fact that contemporary musicals have overtaken live action and animation and Broadway, I just don't know how, but okay, I guess. But selling musicals to the theater-going audience is very difficult right now. So from my perspective, it isn't just that this doesn't seem particularly special at the moment, or that this is a really shitty motivation to all get together, but also that quotes like this will alienate musical theater lovers who, if they had heard something a little bit more vulnerable and sincere, would have been willing to give the movie a chance. Even as cynical as I am, knowing things that are not considered common knowledge about Disney and Pixar, I would have been willing if I had heard something different. But instead, here we are. And when I asked people who are not chronically online what they thought about this, young, old, musical fan, musical hater, Pixar fan, Pixar hater, what have you, even they were side-eyeing that quote like, what exactly do they mean by that? So even though to me this quote told me everything, to other people it actually tells them nothing. Because the traditional Disney musical is no more. Is my opinion set in stone? No. But these feelings are going to be my first and strongest associations with this movie for now. This article and that quote is the story's very first promise. Now to win me and the other people who share my feelings over, they have to undo the damage that their first promise has done, on top of making a strong enough new promise to capture our interest. It is honestly such a shame that they thoughtlessly gave this movie that doesn't even have a name yet such baggage. And all of this was completely avoidable. I could say that my hope is that the provider of this quote is simply out of touch. But given the fact that they're the senior vice president of development, that wouldn't really make the situation any better. I would say that I hope that this philosophy does not infect the heart of the movie or become a prominent thing during the promotion of it, but honestly, I have no hope left anyway. But if you want to hear even more about the downfall of the Disney movie musical, or why Pixar/Disney can't learn from K-pop demon hunters, go check out one of these videos on screen now. This has been Calxiyn caring way too much, and I hope now you care too.